So as I was talking about.
Hello. Hello. Sorry. I need to ask something if it's okay. I have a problem with the exams. I have two exams in the same time. Yeah, that exams at this course and another one. Have a solution for that?
I'm sorry, I cannot have this solution. I think you have to call the administration.
Okay, I try to speak with Yunus Emre because I'm an Erasmus student, and he told me to ask you, and I don't know what to do now.
Okay, I will see. I will see if there is no solution. I will see what I can do, what type of compensation I can imagine for you. I will it to the administration. I have to know if it is possible for the administration to allow me to make a compensation for you, but I will think about it and I will speak maybe with the administration. So can you make me an email?
Okay.
Okay.
At that address with .fr at the end?
Yes. You can do. I use.
Okay, thank you so much.
Okay. So the first rule is the rule of legitimacy. This means that the consent of the public authority to be engaged in an international agreement must be given by competent authorities. The expression of the free will of the state or of the international organization to conclude an international agreement must be made by competent institutions of the state or of the international organization. So this is the constitutional organization of each state or the constitution of each international organization, which determines, which shows us the ability of institutions to conclude international agreements. For example, for a state, international agreements can be signed by chief of states, the president for Turkey, for example. They can be signed by the president. They can be negotiated by ministers of foreign affairs, by diplomats, by plenipotentiaires. They can be also signed by them if it is allowed by the constitution. So the legitimacy is the authenticity of the consent given to an agreement. And you can see, for example, also Vienna Convention of 1996 for states and Vienna Convention of 1986 for international organizations. The expression of will must be legitimated by domestic laws or by the international organization constitutive treaties. But there are marginal situations. There are extreme situations where an agreement can be possible even between a state and a rebel group. Between a state and a group which are rebels, which are not constitutive of a state, but we can have some agreements between those rebels, those um, entities, those entities which are not states. This is also possible. And of course, there frequently those kinds of treaties are hidden by states, but it is not impossible that an international agreement has legitimacy in international legal order, even though it is concluded between a state and a rebel organization. Maybe we have an example, one or two examples, and we have the example of Sudan. Sudan Popular Liberation Army, which concluded an agreement between Sudan government, and there is a case, Abiy case of the arbitration tribunal of the 22 July of 2009. So this information is this example. I'm not asking you to give me those kinds of example with dates of the jurisdiction, etc., the case law, etc. I'm not expecting you to know all those details, but I'm just giving you an illustration. Maybe if you will curious, maybe you will look at it. There are possibilities in international law which allows states to conclude agreements between non-governmental entities. And those agreements can have legal effects in international law. So this example shows us clearly the non-formalistic character of international legal order. International legal order is consensual, is based on a consensus between sovereign member states of the international society, and so there is no legal formalistic conception in international legal order. The second law, the second rule, which is the second condition for the validity of international treaties, is the lawfulness, the rule of lawfulness. Generally, the conclusion of an international treaty requires several steps of procedure. The first step is negotiation. The second step is authentication. The third step is ratification or approval. And the fifth stage is entry in force. Those steps have legal importance. They have legal effects, so they are important. You have to distinguish between those different steps in order to understand the formation and the validity, legal validity of international treaties. The first step is negotiation. It's very easy to understand. In order to form the agreement, diplomats of different states or international organizations will discuss possible solutions. There will be some discussions in order to realize a draft agreement, for example, draft agreement in order to propose it to the chief of states. This is the first step, the negotiation, diplomatic step. The second step, authentication, is the signature of the agreement. If the draft agreement is signed by competent authorities, by chief of state or by a representative of Ministry of Foreign Affairs, the text will be authenticated, and but this is not sufficient. The authentication is not sufficient for an international treaty to get into force. The second step is the ratification or approval. Ratification or approval, it is the main important step where a member, a state or international organization will give its consent, will express its will to conclude the treaty. The ratification or approval is the adoption of necessary internal legal measures, legal acts, in order to make the signed agreements enter in the internal legal system. So in member states, it's generally with a vote of a bill. A bill is voted by a parliament in order to ratify an international agreement signed by the chief of state. So this is the confirmation, this ratification or this approval is the national confirmation, is the internal confirmation of the agreements. This is very important to understand. This ratification is important because the ratification process makes us understand that there are two legal systems, the international legal system and the internal legal system. It is not sufficient that the agreement is signed in international legal order. The treaty is not binding until it is also ratified in national order. The ratification for most of international treaties, the ratification is necessary. But there are several simple agreements which are not necessarily ratified. A simple approval, executive approval, is sufficient. There is no need to a voted bill by the parliament. So the ratification is generally by a law, by a bill voted by the parliament, and the approval is the process of the executive members of the government or the chief of states, and there is no need to vote a bill. So important treaties requires a bill, and simple agreements don't require a vote of a bill, but simple approval by executive. The last step, the fifth step, is the entry in force. The treaty becomes binding, legally binding, in internal order when it enters in force legally in this internal legal order. Generally, this entry in force in domestic law is necessary to make international treaty effective also in international legal order. So always make in your head, make this distinction always between international legal order and internal legal order. A treaty must be entered in force in internal legal order in order to become effective in international legal order. Generally, if it's a bilateral treaty, it is required that each country ratified and make the treaty entered in force in their legal order. Otherwise, the treaty won't be effective in international legal order. If it is a multilateral treaty, if there are more than two states or more than two international organizations, generally it is required that major party of members ratified and make the treaty enter in force in their legal order. It's the three-quarter, the number required in order to make an international treaty effective in international legal order is that three-quarter of member states parties must have completely done the procedure of ratification and entry in force. So entry in force means that the treaty will be binding in national order and automatically in international legal order. But this lawfulness rule, the rule of lawfulness, which is based on this five procedure, requires also that the will of state expressed won't be affected by some kinds of disturbing elements, some kinds of negative elements. There are four examples in Vienna Convention of 1969, Article 48, Article 49, Article 51 and 52, and Article 53. There are four defaults, for situation which affects lawfulness. The first is the error. If one of states commits an error on a fact or on a situation which is the object of the treaty, its consent is unlawful. For example, if maps are false, imagine, for example, a treaty on international borders between two states, and there is a river, but the map was wrong, so the border was wrong, and it was the Saint Croix River case in 1831. We have an arbitral award of 1831, and one of the states was made a mistake in maps, and so the treaty was invalid. The Article 49 of Vienna Convention is a second example of default, is the fraud. Fraud, it's a fraudulent conduct of a member state in order to make negotiations false. The third example is the coercion, when a member state use violence on the other state in order to conclude the convention. It was a case when Hitler imposed the conclusion of a treaty to the Polish government. I don't remember really, but there are examples. And the last one is the jus cogens. a treaty concluded, a treaty contrary to a jus cogens, to a highest mandatory principle of international law, as the prohibition of genocide, for example. If there is a treaty contrary to this principle, this treaty is invalid also in international legal order. Invalidity means, according to the Article 69 of Vienna Convention, invalidity means that the treaty will be void. It will have no legal effect. It won't be binding. The treaty won't be binding between states. So, in order to finish my intervention for today, I would like to resume a little bit this first part about international treaties. The most important point is that the international law is not formalistic, so there is no strict rules on forms of international treaties. And second point, there are some standards, there are some rules, especially in Vienna Convention of 1969, which are legitimacy and lawfulness. And this is all I would like to tell you about. I think those are bases necessary for you to understand what a legal international treaty is in a legal sense. Next week, we will talk about legal effects of these treaties. Thank you very much, and I hope you have a nice afternoon. Thank you.
Sorry.
Yes.
Sorry. I wanted to ask about the exam, how it's going to be structured, and like whether it is in presence or online.
Okay. The exam is 22 November. I think I learned it from the assistant, and it will be a simple question about the state, as a subject of law of international law, international legal order. I want you to explain the basic elements of a state, and especially it's very important for me to know that you understand the concept of sovereignty, which only has states. Unlike international organizations have only competencies. They are regulated by the principle of conferral. So it will be just, I think, one question. It's a midterm exam, so it's not very. I don't know how matter it is. In notation, 40%, I think, for your final notation. There will be one question, and you will answer in one page. I think it's sufficient. One page explaining, and there will be a physical examination if I can organize it, or otherwise, if it is not possible, I will see how can I organize otherwise the situation. But in principle, I prefer classroom examination.
Okay, thank you so much.
And I think I will be there in the beginning of December. I think we will have maybe a lesson together physically after 5 December.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so thank you.
Thank you so much.
And
bye.
Bye. See you next week.